starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Ed, Edd and Eddy. Ed, Edd and Eddy ran for 5 seasons, and it's been rumored that among all these episodes that were aired, there was one that went missing and was only shown once on TV before it never aired again. The rumor started in 2001, and it was alleged that this missing episode was called The Scarecrow Boy. For a short summary of the episode, Sarah puts on a play, her own version of The Wizard of Oz, casting herself as Dorothy, Jimmy as the Tin Man, Eddie as the Cowardly Lion, Ed as the Scarecrow, and Double D as the director. After rehearsing, Sarah becomes so mad at Ed for messing up his lines that she decides to lock him out of the house. Since he was in his costume when this happened, the other kids in the neighborhood began making fun of him, calling him Scarecrow Boy. Even crazier, every time he is called Scarecrow Boy, he becomes stiffer, eventually turning into one. There's pretty much no evidence that this episode ever existed, other than fans claiming that they once watched it on TV. In our number 9 spot today, we have Inspector Gadget. In the show Inspector Gadget, we never see the evil Dr. Claw's face on screen. However, there's been a long-standing urban legend that we did see him at one point. In this one mysterious episode, we got a glimpse of his face, and that was later used as the inspiration for the action figure of Dr. Claw, which now shows his face. The creators knew this was a huge deal at the time, and when you went to buy the action figure in stores, they covered up his face in the packaging, so you had to buy it back in the day to see what Mr. Claw looked like. These days, you can just Google it and it'll be the first thing that pops up. His face is also briefly visible in the Inspector Gadget game for the Super Nintendo, but since the quality of the game was pretty bad, we never got a good look until the action figure. In our number 8 spot today, we have Dungeons & Dragons. In the 1980s Dungeons & Dragons cartoon show, there is a famous urban legend that the last episode of the show shared a crazy secret about the entire show that changes everything. The episode itself also reportedly never made it to TV, but some people claimed that it was accidentally aired once. This episode revealed that all of the characters were actually killed in a roller coaster accident, and they ended up in the afterlife. The writer who made the real final episode has denied these claims numerous times, and he even uploaded his script to prove it. In the ending, the kids deliberated after being offered a choice whether to go back to Earth or continue fighting in the D&D world. In our number 7 spot today, we have Gravity Falls. The story with the show Gravity Falls was that allegedly it was supposed to be 3 seasons, but was cut down to only 2 seasons after Alex Hirsch decided he wanted to wrap up the show. Apparently, many fans think that there were a lot of unanswered questions that would have been answered in this rumored 3rd season. The source of this idea comes from a Reddit AMA done after the season 1 finale, where a fan asked how many seasons he'd ideally like the show to last, with Hirsch's response being that he originally considered 3 seasons but now believed that was too much. Hirsch would say many times over the years that the show was never planned to have 3 seasons, and blames the rumor on the fact that he was not allowed to announce that season 2 was the last season when he first learned so. In our number 6 spot today, we have Phineas and Ferb. Phineas and Ferb is one of those cartoons where there are so many strange theories, it's hard to know where to start. But the most insane one that I have ever heard of claims that Dr. Doofenshmirtz, the evil madman, is actually the father of Phineas. The main evidence is that Phineas and Doofenshmirtz both have the same shaped heads. Let's break this down. We know that Linda, Phineas's mom, and Doof actually dated way back, so not hard to assume that they could have birthed a child. The story is that the couple dated when they were both really young and eventually split up. Both of them go on to get married to other people and have kids with them. That explains Candace's father. After a few years, Linda either splits from Candace's dad and has a fling with Doof, or she cheats with Doof. Either way, it results in the birth of Phineas. Then, years later, she meets Ferb's dad, they get married, and then they turn into one big family. In our number 5 spot today, we have Strawberry Shortcake. Okay, so basically this isn't necessarily inherently terrifying, but it's kind of crazy to see the power of rumors and how even while the truth is out there, some people will still believe falsities. Basically, this story has to do with Strawberry Shortcake and how there was some troll out there who claimed to be the niece of someone working for the entertainment company that makes the show. Basically, this person went on to spread a ton of rumors, mostly relating to season 4, that includes a ton of false synopsis, and they even manipulated some audio and released it as proof. In the end, this of course was bound to cause trouble, so people began trying to clear the air, and of course once the season was actually released, it was clear that this troll had just released a bunch of lies. In the end, however, despite all of the proof that these were false claims, there are many people out there who still choose to reject the truth and take these lies as reality. In our number 4 spot today we have Mickey Mouse. So basically this is a legend that starts out 100% true. Basically it starts out saying that on September 1st, 1939, the BBC broadcast of the Mickey Mouse cartoon Mickey's Gala premiere was abruptly interrupted and ceased due to the sudden outbreak of World War II. That's terrible, and it's absolutely terrifying. The legend goes on to claim that after the war ended and when broadcasts resumed, that the episode was picked up in the exact same moment as when it had previously been interrupted all those years ago. That certainly would have been slightly symbolic, but also exceptionally eerie, but it turns out that that is not true. While it is true that the cartoon was indeed the last program shown by the BBC before suspension, it aired in its entirety before the interruption in 1939, as well as after the interruption in 1946. It is believed that this legend came from a 1984 documentary which showed exactly what the legend described, but this was likely placed in the documentary for dramatic effect. In our number 3 spot today we have Gravity Falls 2. For another Gravity Falls urban legend, we have this one that circulated the internet. Basically it comes in the form of a screenshot that shows Dipper and Mabel with a slender man standing there watching them from behind. Definitely creepy, but turns out that this is in fact not real. The actual episode shows no slender man, and creator Alex Hirsch actually commented on this legend in an interview. He noted that one of the very first times he overheard someone talking about the show after its premiere was when he heard someone telling another person that the legend was true. Despite this rumor not being true at all, there is actually a Slender Man appearance in Gravity Falls media, and it's a one-panel cameo in the story titled Face It, which is in the graphic novel Gravity Falls Lost Legends. In our number 2 spot today we have Hey Arnold. Hey Arnold is an absolutely classic cartoon, but this legend surrounding the episode titled Pigeon Man is quite dark. Basically, in this episode there is a character who is called the Pigeon Man, and the legend suggests that in the original ending of this episode, he takes his own life after finding his home destroyed. The legend continues on to say that Nickelodeon forced the writers to change the ending because they were worried it was too dark, and if this were true, I would certainly be inclined to agree. In the end, however, this legend was in fact debunked by the show creator himself, Craig Bartlett. That was never the intended ending, and I think that's probably a good thing. In the actual ending of the show, the Pigeon Man flies away with the pigeons, and because of this dark rumor, people speculate that this was actually his death, but that is also likely untrue because of his subsequent appearances later on. In our number 1 spot today we have King of the Hill. King of the Hill had one episode that was subject to the internet's weirdest and darkest rumors. The episode in question is called Pygmalion. The episode as a whole is wild, and it's really dark and creepy, which is exactly why it isn't really a surprise that there's a dark legend surrounding it. Basically, in this episode, there's a character called Trip Larson who suffers from quite a few serious things, and he also inherited the Larson's pork products plant from his father. Long story short, he does some messed up stuff and ends up meeting a gruesome fate in the end. I'll spare you the gory details. So basically, according to urban legend, it says that after Trip's death, while Peggy and Luann are talking and celebrating, you can see an incredibly graphic and dark image of Trip's body behind them. There is simply no evidence that this ever happened, and it's likely just a really dark story that had its origins somewhere on the internet, but you really just wonder exactly where this sort of thing came from.
Starting off this countdown, we have Angela Anaconda. Now, this was a Canadian-based cartoon, so I'm not sure if anyone outside of Canada got to experience this show. Lucky you if you didn't. But basically, the show's style is very creepy. It's like mixing real-life faces into the cartoon world. The human faces and bodies are all gray, but everything else is in color. So many people have commented on the show's style saying it creeped them out or gave them nightmares. And I can see why. Just the way that the characters move their lips and eyes are just, it's so creepy. And the opening theme song does not help their case. During this song, you see Angela sabotaging her rival and ends up dropping a heavy stage curtain on her. Angela is not a nice girl. She definitely has a dark side. And in our 9th spot, we have Miss Spider's Sunny Patch Friends. Oh, based on the title, it sounds like it should be like a pretty, sweet, innocent cartoon, right? Well, let's look at the characters in the show. You have Bounce. this blue character with a massive smile and orange eyes with orange eyelashes. Then you have Dragon, a dragonfly with long, sharp eyelashes and blue eyes. Honestly, just you gotta look at their pictures. They're pretty terrifying. But the worst character would have to be Spiderus, a white spider with a weird human head and red lips. Then you have his wife that literally looks like the devil. Like, what's with these characters? They're all terrifying looking. Moving on to number 8, we have Real Monsters. Okay, I never watched this show as a kid, and I'm happy I didn't. You'll understand in a second. So this show is about a group of monsters in training. Ickis, Oblina, and Crumb are all monsters who attend a school to learn how to frighten humans. Kind of sounds like Monsters University and Monsters Inc. once I think about it. Now let's take a look at the design of these monsters. They are so creepy and you cannot convince me otherwise. So let's start with Ickis. Probably the least scary looking one. Ickis is like a little gremlin with a wide Cheshire cat smile. But his eyes turn red and his teeth turn sharp when he scares people. Then we have Oblina. She's like an evil black and white candy cane looking creature. But take a look at her beady little glowing green eyes and huge lips and mouth. Oblina is like a serpent type creature that can contort her body. She can use her teeth, lips, and tongue to scare people. Then you have the scariest one of all, Crumb. This naked looking monster. He literally has detached eyes, so he's always stuck holding them up in the air. And he's covered in hair and it just looks super disturbing. His scare tactic is to use his grossness to frighten humans. Well, they succeeded with that. So yeah, the creatures alone make this show terrifying. I would be shocked if it left a lot of kids scarred. In our 7th spot, we have the Real Ghostbusters. Yes, our classic movie had a cartoon as well. This was a 1986 show filled with terrifying monsters. If this show was still around today, you know there would be tons of moms complaining about it, saying it's not appropriate for the kids, blah blah. Okay, Karen. So let's talk about some of these creepy monsters. So up first we have Akira. This is the demon version of a Mesopotamian goddess of disease and death. She basically wants to create chaos through disease. Her appearance is disgusting, with a shriveled green zombie looking face with worm type creatures for hands. Each worm has its own face with a tongue with sharp spikes on it. Akira would then infect other individuals, which causes them to get big boils on them. These boils were in fact her offspring. Then you have Vathek and his pals. Vathek is a big blob type butcher creature with a buzzsaw in his head. His friend Grizzle is shown with his mouth sewn shut and dentist drills for hands. And then you have Corpsicle, a big blob with no face and just hands for eyes. Moving on to number 6, we have Tales from the Crypt Keeper. I'm sure all of you 90s kids remember this show. I certainly do. Alright, so the Crypt Keeper plays the host of the show who introduces what each episode is going to be about. The series then goes on and talks about classic legends like stories of vampires, zombies, and werewolves. But a lot of the episodes have scary monsters that scare the human characters. Let's talk about the 2 most frightening episodes in my opinion. Starting off, we have the episode titled The Weeping Woman, where Camille and Mildred visit a haunted Victorian mansion. At night, they are woken up by creepy moaning and objects flying around. That's when they see the Weeping Woman, an old eyeless and toothless woman with scraggly gray hair and long black nails. The second night, the woman looks even more terrifying with red glowing eyes. She ends up chasing the girls around the house, not to mention chasing one of the girls to the top of the roof where she almost gets pushed off to death. Then you have the other episode titled Sharon Share-alike. This is an episode about a girl named Shauna who refuses to share her toys with her little sister Katie. As a result, she hides one of her old toy dolls in the vent so her sister can't play with it. Then the doll ends up coming alive and haunting her. The episode is really, really creepy, with the doll coming alive and saying things like, "You're not nice, I don't like you." The doll ends up chasing her all over the house, giggling and chanting her name. Move over, Annabelle, okay? We got a more terrifying doll here. We're now on our 5th and halfway mark with Scooby-Doo, my favorite cartoon of all time. But I had to put it on the list just because some episodes actually gave me the creeps. So I'm sure we all know about Fred, Daphne, Velma, Shaggy, and of course Scooby-Dooby-Doo, my favorite group of meddling kids that solve mysteries. Some of the villains are pretty creepy, like the episode titled Vampire Bats and Scary Cats, where the team visits Daphne's friend Lisa and they encounter a vampire. The vampire ends up turning Lisa into one as well. When this happens, she turns and looks directly into the camera and growls. Just the image of her scary vampire face is just ingrained in my mind forever. Then you have the episode with the ghost clown, who, again, looks very creepy, and hypnotizes Shaggy, Scooby, and Daphne to all do dangerous circus acts. I didn't think that they could make clowns any scarier until this one came along and manipulates and hypnotizes people. How about the episode with the phantom green ghosts and their terrifying, cackly laugh? Later on in the episode, the crew finds 5 coffins, with one shaped like a dog. When they open them, it reveals some of the characters unconscious in there. I think the scariest thing is how whenever they make a ghost or monster appear, it's always like a POV zoom effect style. So it shows the monster closing in on you as they directly stare right at you. And lastly, we have the episode where the gang visits a sanatorium with a crazed doctor character with green glowing eyes. In the episode, you can literally see dead bodies under a sheet being brought in and out. Although they weren't real bodies in the end, it's still not kid-friendly. And our fourth spot, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. Yes, I know I've talked about Courage so much on this channel, but it's freaking creepy. One of the episodes that scared me as a kid was the one titled King Ramses' Curse. That's right, the Egyptian pharaoh makes an appearance in this episode. So Eustace ends up finding and keeping an ancient Egyptian slab. As a result, he's visited by King Ramses. King Ramses just appears outside their home and he's swaying back and forth. He's like, return the slab. Okay, now it's funny, but back when I was a kid, it was terrifying. That alone could just send shivers down your spine. Then you have the episode Freaky Fred, where Mariel's cousin Fred comes into town to visit. Fred looks insane with his creepy wide-mouthed smile and slanted eyebrows. What's even worse is that he has creepy inner dialogue that only the audience can hear. And it's entirely in rhymes. Let's not forget about the episode where Muriel gets possessed. Or how about the episode where that glowing white human face visits their home? All are perfect examples of how disturbing that show really was. But it's also a really good show, can't lie. In our third spot, we have Martin Mystery. Another one of my favorite cartoons as a child, although certain episodes definitely scared me. So this show surrounds Martin Mystery and Diana Lombard, two 16-year-old step-siblings that work for an organization referred to as the Center. Basically, their job is to solve cases and protect people from supernatural threats. There are multiple episodes that are completely messed up. The one I remember giving me nightmares when I was younger is the episode titled Revenge of the Doppelganger. Basically, in this episode, women are being attacked by some sort of electrical shadow that completely erases their face. In the episode, this creature attacks multiple women that all have similar features and steals their faces, leaving them looking like creepy mannequins. Or how about the episode The Nightmare of the Coven, where 3 students used a book of spells and released this witch demon thing. The witch ends up turning more of the female students into witches. They all look terrifying with their sharp teeth and green skin. And then we have the episode The Body Swappers, which is a reference to the movie The Thing. Basically, this organism creature goes around using humans as its hosts. In the episode, whoever the organism gets to turns them into big monsters with sharp teeth and long tentacles. And there are plenty of other horrifying creatures seen throughout the series that will definitely give you the creeps. In our second spot, we have SpongeBob. Yes, I know you wouldn't think that this show would be on the list since it's about a cheerful little sponge, but there are numerous episodes that are quite scary. Let's start off with the episode where SpongeBob thinks he kills the health inspector, and then him and Mr. Krabs literally have to dispose of his body, which goes terribly wrong, and they just keep moving and hiding the body so that the cops don't catch them. Don't worry, turns out he wasn't dead, but it's still pretty terrifying. Or how about the hash-slinging slasher episode? When SpongeBob and Squidward work the night shift and believe they are visited by a dead fry cook with a rusty spatula as a hand. Or the episode where SpongeBob gets injected by snail plasma and slowly turns into this creepy looking snail. There are so many more episodes that I can name, like when SpongeBob gets a splinter and turns into this huge weeping red sword. The list goes on and on. The Hooky episode, oh my gosh. And in our number 1 spot, we have the show Grisly Tales for Gruesome Kids. This show is about terrible kids receiving cruel and gruesome punishments for their behavior. Honestly, it's a good way to scare your kids into behaving nicely. In one episode titled Death by Chocolate, it surrounds this greedy girl who we see indulging in tons of chocolate. She's also quite rude to her sister, often calling her a slave. Well, she gets instant karma as a fly ends up laying an egg in her chocolate bunny. She ends up eating a maggot, and as a result, she turns into a giant fly, in which her sister kills, and then chocolate just spews everywhere. Like, that's terrifying. She literally killed her sister. Next, we have the episode The Spaghetti Man. Basically, it's about a bunch of picky eaters who then get captured by the Spaghetti Man. The Spaghetti Man then turns the kids into spaghetti and eats them for dinner. At the end of the episode, it's implied that a family ate their own son for dinner since he got turned into lasagna noodles. And then they're shown eating the lasagna. Like, is that even considered cannibalism? I don't even know.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have The Simpsons. So for this one, we have this rumored lost episode of The Simpsons that is said to be titled Dead Bart. Basically, rumor has it that this episode is based on the idea that Matt Groening has this ability to accurately predict the death of all of the guest stars from the show. I mean, it seems really far-fetched, of course, but we've also seen scenarios where The Simpsons somehow accurately predicted something long before it happened. Anyways, this episode is said to have been aiming at putting this ability on full display by having it be animated to show each of the regulars or the stars of the show future death dates. Yeah, a little morbid, right? So according to internet legend, the show featured Bart being ripped out of a plane through the window. Okay, not great. This leads to his family going into mourning for a full year until they are nothing but skeleton versions of themselves. It is also said that the graveyard where Bart is buried is full of tombstones, all of which have the death dates of every Simpsons guest that had ever and will ever appear on the show. In our number 9 spot today, we have SpongeBob SquarePants. Okay, how could an episode of SpongeBob be scary? I mean, that jolly little sponge is like a ray of sunshine anywhere he goes in Bikini Bottom, but apparently there is one episode that is not like the others. Internet rumors have suggested that there is a lost, dark, eerie episode of SpongeBob that we are all definitely glad we haven't seen. Rumor says that this episode never even made it to the final edit because it was so dark. The rumor of its existence stems from someone who claims to have seen the episode while doing an internship with Nickelodeon. This episode is said to deal with really serious topics like death and maybe even Squidward taking his own life, which honestly is really messed up. The episode thankfully never made it to air, and it is said that while there was an investigation into the footage, nothing ever ended up coming of it. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Peanut Vendor. The Peanut Vendor was made in 1933, and it's a really short animated film and just shows a monkey who's singing a song. This sounds cute, but I assure you, it is the stuff of nightmares. The monkey is selling peanuts, and a song is about how he is only there for a limited time, so everyone should come and buy some before they go to sleep. This all seems very reasonable, except for the fact that this animated monkey character does not look like a monkey at all, and instead looks absolutely horrifying. If you put this guy next to Jason Voorhees, I feel like I would still be more scared of whatever he is. I feel like I do not want to buy his peanuts, but I'm afraid that if I don't, he's gonna come and find me. I truly didn't know that a 2-minute animated video could be this creepy, but they certainly delivered. In our number 7 spot today, we have Tom's Basement. Tom and Jerry is an absolute classic. What a silly little show with a great dynamic. Tom was of course the bloodthirsty cat, while Jerry was the quick, clever mouse, but apparently things for both of them turned sinister in a rumored lost episode called Tom's Basement. It is said that this lost episode was actually a short, and internet legend says that in the episode, Tom's owner told him to stay out of the basement. In fact, this owner is definitely a terrible person and is said to actually harm Tom in the episode anytime he gets near the basement door. Legend goes that Jerry ends up using this to his advantage, and he starts to make Tom chase him into the basement, where he then hides while this terrible owner loses his temper. In the end, it is said that this situation continues to escalate, and it leads to Jerry killing this guy. Him and Tom then end up hiding the body in the basement, and Jerry goes on to also kill Tom. I mean, what in the world? I'm just glad this episode isn't around anymore. In our number 6 spot today, we have Cat Dog. Cat Dog is actually a cartoon I can remember watching when I was a kid, and I remember it scaring the heck out of me. Cat Dog is half cat, half dog creature that gets itself into situations and has quite the time figuring everything out, considering the cat half and the dog half can't seem to get along with each other. This is just a weird premise in general, but it's not the strangest part of the show. There is an episode when Cat wants to brush Dog's dog's teeth, and he crawls into his own mouth and travels through his own body to get to the dog side, where he then comes out of dog's mouth. So now, Cat is hanging out of dog's mouth, inside out, with veins and muscles and everything we never wanted to see exposed. I know this was probably just meant to be like a silly little thing, but it's actually really scary, and just a lot for anyone to even begin to try and comprehend. Maybe I'm looking into it a little too much as an adult, but overall this show just has a very weird vibe. In our number 5 spot today we have The Kitchen Casanova. The Kitchen Casanova was made in 1996, great year, and was a part of Cartoon Network's What a Cartoon series. Basically it's about a guy who's trying to prepare dinner for his date, but he's exceptionally nervous, and of course, Murphy's Law would have it that everything is going wrong. This cartoon was actually eventually pulled from air because of the fact that at one point he accidentally slices off his fingers and blood goes spurting everywhere, which probably isn't the ideal image for the target audience. I don't even think that this is the worst part. In the end, when the date arrives and he reveals this big meal that he made, it's actually just the grossest and creepiest looking thing ever, and it had me feeling very glad that I was only watching a cartoon. The dinner has eyeballs, bloody bones, a severed human foot, and a rolled up tongue that unfortunately unrolls and then twitches before being covered up again. It's a pile of gross, not really food. I could get past that except for the fact that they actually eat it. I just hate that so much. All in all, this whole thing is just very bizarre, and the ending leaves you with a super uncomfortable feeling. In our number 4 spot today we have Ed, Edd, and Eddy. I personally loved this show as a kid. It was so wacky and wild, but this rumored lost episode definitely doesn't seem like a good time. Legend has it that this lost episode is one that accidentally aired back in 2003. It is said that one day there was supposed to be a rerun of an already aired episode, but instead viewers found themselves watching something much more creepy. Apparently the characters were acting weird and the animation was super choppy. From here, in the last 3 minutes of the episode, claymation characters start to take over, and the episode in general is just really strange and uncomfortable and eerie. People on the internet have said that the episode was just wrong on all levels, and it left them with just a really sinister feeling. In our number 3 spot today we have the Powerpuff Girls. Sugar, spice, and everything nice, the Powerpuff Girls is a classic show that might be surprising to see on this list, unless you have seen or at least heard of this rumored lost episode. While usual episodes of the show saw our 3 superheroes Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup along with their creator Professor Utonium just kicking butt and taking names, this lost episode is said to have shown something much darker. This episode is said to follow Professor Utonium as he encounters a terrifying, dark, zombie-like version of Bubbles. Apparently this Bubbles is on some sort of killing rampage. Yeah. Definitely not the type of Powerpuff episode we're used to seeing. In our number 2 spot today we have Ren and Stimpy. This lost episode of Ren and Stimpy is said to have been titled Man's Best Friend. Rumor has it that this episode was meant to be aired during the original run of the 2nd season, but it never ended up making it to air. This is because it was said to be too controversial. The most important or controversial scene in question from this lost episode is said to have seen Ren getting really violent. In this outburst, people said he was seen smoking cigars after he harmed and almost took someone's life. Rumor has it that the creation of this episode got one of the show's creators fired. This lost episode apparently stayed hidden and didn't air until 11 years later, when that rumored fired creator was able to air it on Ren and Stimpy Adult Party Cartoon, which was the revival of the original series on Spike. In our number 1 spot today we have Barney and Friends. This is said to be a lost episode of Barney and Friends that recently came to light on TikTok. Many users were claiming that they were now remembering this dark episode that they had watched many years ago, and people were claiming that this episode was so dark it made them feel basically traumatized. While Barney and Friends usually had episodes that taught us the value of friendship and good relationships, this episode is said to have a much darker tone and allegedly only aired one single time. The episode in question is said to have been called Death, and many people have claimed that when the theme music started to play, you could hear a sort of creepy whispering just behind the music. After this, everything seemed to return to normal until Barney awoke. When Barney spoke, it was both the sound of his normal giggly voice, but there was also something darker behind it, like another voice underneath that was lower and just sinister sounding. Apparently, this is the episode where Barney said that he was going to teach about death. People on TikTok have said that the episode ends with Barney going on a rampage and killing all of his friends on set, and at the end, he's still saying the classic I love you, you love me song, but just just in a bit more of a screamy, demonic way than I think any of us are probably used to. So yeah, while I'm not entirely sure this episode ever existed, if it did, I think it's probably for the best that it stays lost in the past.
Coming in at number 10, we have Batman's Flashbacks. Batman the Animated Series still stands as one of the best cartoons of all time, especially when you're talking about superhero cartoons. There is so much about the show that is accurate to the comics, and it helped people in the 90s embrace the darker Batman and make it the new mainstream image. Not to mention it has one of the best versions of the Joker ever seen. And part of what made the show so good is how well it was able to bring in the dark past of Bruce Wayne. Throughout the series, Bruce has flashbacks of his parents being killed right in front of him and how he feels a great pain because he wasn't able to save them. I mean, Bruce, you were just a kid. I don't think you should let that weigh on your soul. What were you supposed to do? Disarm a dude with your 10-year-old self? But watching a grown man deal with the very harsh reality that his parents were killed right in front of him and that he was unable to save them is pretty heavy for a kids show, and that is why it is perfect for this list. Also, who needs therapy when you got billions of dollars, a fear of bats, and Superman is your best friend? Coming in at number 9, we have Mufasa dying. Every kid from the 90s remembers this moment. This is one of the hardest things to watch to this day. If you have never seen Lion King, you have had your time, and I'm about to spoil the whole movie for you. And I don't feel bad about it because there's even been a new live action one that recently came out, so you've had lots of opportunities to see this movie. Get hooked up with like Disney Plus or something like that. But in this infamous scene, the evil Scar manipulates Simba so he ends up caught in a stampede, and then he tells Mufasa that he must go rescue his son. Mufasa saves Simba, but then puts himself in a vulnerable position where Scar comes in and kills him. And then you have a scene where Mufasa is lying on the ground dead, and Simba comes up to his dad's dead body and keeps saying, "Get up." It's hitting me right now. I'm just thinking about it. What the hell? How hard do you have to make me cry, Disney? What's wrong with you? I only have so many tears I can shed in one sitting. Here's a fun story about that movie. I saw this movie in theaters when I was a kid, and a few scenes before Mufasa gets killed, I turned to my mom and I said, "That's like me and Dad." And then boom, he dies, and my mom cried the whole movie. Who knew you could emotionally scar your parents? Coming in at number 8, we have Dexter Can See. Dexter's Laboratory is one of the best cartoons of all time, and it might have the best intro of any cartoon ever. That song is amazing. Every episode has Dexter using his big brain to whip up something to solve his problems, but of course he always makes things worse. And in one episode where Dexter wants to get rid of his glasses, he builds a machine to give him the best laser eye surgery possible. Now, Dexter can see every last detail of the world around him, but the thing is, he can see too good. His vision is so perfect that the people around him look disgusting and deformed, and he can't even bear to look at his own family. Coming in at number 7, we have Teenage Mutant Ninja Creeps. In the classic TMNT cartoon, there was the tomboyish news reporter April O'Neil. Well, one episode she is invited to a fancy party at an embassy, and she decides that she's gonna get all spruced up for the event. So she does her hair and she gets a dress, and then she shows off her look to the turtles. Then all of a sudden the turtles start to get interested in her in a way that's a little more serious than friendship. In fun Saturday morning cartoon style, this is just a crush episode, but when we break down the cross-species sexual interest, it becomes very disturbing. Coming in at number 6, we have the Mr. Meaty Tapeworm. It's got some puppets that have some strange features, and all their faces look like they're bulging out of their heads. And the whole show takes place in a fast food joint that is run so horribly it could ruin anyone's appetite. But in one particular episode, Parker eats some raw meat and gets a tapeworm rummaging around in his insides. Eventually you get to see the tapeworm as it gets fished out of Parker, and the thing is huge. It was like there was an anaconda living inside him. And then you get to see the tapeworm find a new host and crawl down their throat. It sounds like I just described a horror movie to you. Coming in at number 5, we have Katara Learns Bloodbending. Avatar stands not as just a great cartoon, but as an amazing television show, as it tackles so many issues involving war, famine, greed, and in this particular episode, the acquiring of power. The Avatar gang is on an adventure and they meet a mysterious lady who teaches Katara a new ability. As the Avatar series moves on, we learn that all of the bending techniques can be used to manipulate something more advanced. With fire, we have lightning, earth turns to metal, and in the case of water, it turns to blood. As you can imagine, blood bending a person is pretty much an instant kill. The psychological effect on Katara is serious. It's one of the heaviest parts of the show when Katara breaks down and starts crying. Coming in at number 4, we have Sabretooth's Flashbacks. The 90s X-Men cartoon is an absolute home run. It opened up so many kids to the world of mutants, and that world is not always rainbows and lollipops. In one particular episode, Sabretooth and Wolverine put their differences aside, and the two venture up to Canada to revisit some areas they used to know, and this unlocks some pretty dark memories, particularly one where Sabretooth has a flashback about how his dad used to force him to live in a damp, dark basement on a dirt floor because of his mutation, and how his dad would come down and beat him with a 2x4. Oh my god, that's really messed up. Coming at number 3, we have Batman Beyond Earth Mover. You can't really get more intense than looking at your own parent's dead body. In the episode Earth Mover, a man dies, but through some cartoon magic his corpse is given some superpowers with chemical waste. Being buried in the ground, he is able to use his powers to summon earth golems to send out for his bidding. He's doing this mostly to protect his daughter, and eventually she comes face to face with her father's rotting body that is all juiced up from the chemical spill. That's not something you're going to forget anytime soon. Coming in at number 2, we have the opening scene from Up. This is hands down one of the most screw you moments in anything animated. Like, Pixar doesn't play nice for a second in this movie. They're like, hey, why don't we open up the movie with a couple that actually found true love? They really love each other. And you know what? They're gonna stick it out for each other no matter what happens. They're gonna love each other until the end. They get married and it's a beautiful wedding. All of their friends are there. They build a home together. They really love this home and it brings them so much closer together because they work on it together. This sounds like the most beautiful love story of all time, and it sounds like I'm telling you most of a movie. No, we're only 2 minutes into the movie. Then they have a dream to go on an amazing adventure together, but the house keeps breaking down, so they have to keep taking their savings out to fix the house, and they have to put their dream on hold. So they decide, why don't they start a family? That sounds wholesome, and two people who love each other that much deserve this. Well, it turns out she can't have kids. Are you sad yet? Well, if you weren't, then she gets sick and she slowly dies. And then an old man who really only loved one person in his life is left alone. 4 minutes into a movie. Coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Jelly Bean Man from Rick and Morty. Not all cartoons are for kids, and I think Rick and Morty is a perfect example of that. Rick and Morty still stands as one of my favorite shows of all time, but there have definitely been some moments in that show that are a little questionable. Like the episode where Morty gets to pick the adventure. This is the episode Me Seeks and Destroy. Outside of all the other crazy stuff that goes on the episode, like the Me Seeks coming together in a mob to kill Jerry, there's also a part where Rick and Morty stop at what looks like a mystical tavern. They want to grab a drink and continue on their adventure. Morty steps into the bathroom to take a pee before they leave, and then the Jelly Bean King comes into the bathroom. He seems friendly at first, but then he tries to kiss Morty, and then he attacks Morty, and then Morty has to fight him off and smashes his head in a toilet. The whole scene is super disturbing and makes me so uncomfortable. I think that might be the most disturbing scene in all of Rick and Morty, and this is a show that has people's heads explode on the regular. If you can think of a scene that is worse than that, please leave it in the comments below.
Starting off in our number 10 spot, we have Courage the Cowardly Dog. We are starting this list off with intention today because I feel like this is one of the most widely feared children's cartoons ever. Courage the Cowardly Dog is an absolutely iconic cartoon that I can vividly remember absolutely terrifying me as a child. The show is basically just about Courage, who is a dog with human-like characteristics, and his elderly owners. The three all live in the middle of nowhere, and each episode they are thrown into different insane, bizarre, and usually really disturbing situations that they have to get out of. The show is known for its extremely eerie and creepy atmosphere and the energy that the show gives off. Contrary to the name, Courage is a dog who is very easily frightened. He was abandoned when he was a puppy after his parents were sent into outer space, and this is when the very friendly Muriel found him and took him in. Muriel, however, is married to the grumpy, mean, and greedy Eustace, who is often quite rude to Courage. Despite being terrified, Courage always finds a way to face his fears in order to protect his owners, and I think that is something that we can all appreciate. All in all, Courage the Cowardly Dog is a fantastic cartoon, but it is most definitely very surreal and pretty unbelievable at times. In our number 9 spot today, we have The Kitchen Casanova. The Kitchen Casanova was made in 1996 and was a part of Cartoon Network's What a Cartoon series. Basically, it was about a guy who is trying to prepare dinner for his date, but he is exceptionally nervous, and of course Murphy's Law would have it that everything is going wrong. This cartoon cartoon was actually eventually pulled from air because of the fact that at one point he accidentally slices off one of his fingers and blood goes spurting everywhere, which probably isn't an ideal image for children, but I honestly don't even think that was the worst part. In the end, when the date arrives and he reveals the big meal he made, it's actually just the grossest and creepiest looking thing ever, and it had me feeling very glad that I was only watching a cartoon. The dinner has eyeballs, bloody bones, a severed human foot, and a rolled up tongue that unfortunately unrolls, and then twitches before being covered up again. Okay, so it's a pile of gross, really not food, and I could get past that except for the fact that they actually eat it. I just hate that so much. Why did they have to? All in all, the whole thing is just very bizarre, and the ending leaves you with a really uncomfortable feeling. In our number 8 spot today, we have The Cameraman's Revenge. The Cameraman's Revenge comes all the way from 1912, and it is unlike anything I have ever seen before, which after watching it I feel pretty incredibly grateful for. Basically, the whole show is just a bunch of bugs, and I just want to start off by making it clear that these are very real, dead bugs that are being used as puppets, okay? Nightmare fuel enough. That's too much. That little tidbit is enough to make me say no thank you, but if that's not enough to deter you, surely the strange plot will. Basically, Mr. Beetle is out on town and looking for some companionship when he sees a very beautiful lady dragonfly who he flirts with. Unbeknownst to Mr. Beetle, the dragonfly's ex-boyfriend, a grasshopper who is a cameraman, sees this whole thing going down and is very jealous. Well, as it turns out, Mr. Beetle has a Mrs. Beetle who hears about this infidelity from the grasshopper, but as it turns out, she is having her own kind of adulterous experience. You really have to see this one to believe it. It's a bunch of, it's just a bunch of unfaithful bugs. I don't know, and it's stop motion of dead bugs, which just makes it something I'll really never forget. But man, I wish I could. I really do. In our number 7 spot today, we have Sunshine. Sunshine, or Little Sun, is a show from Czechoslovakia that ran from 1979 until 1989, and unfortunately, it's actually pretty hard to find most of the episodes that aired. There were different segments in the show and different characters, and while most of it was fairly normal for the 1980s, there's just one character in this show that is well known for just being extremely creepy. He's not exactly a cartoon, but he is a puppet, and I just had to include him. The character's name is Radifak Plachta, which translates to something like Big Nose Blanket. The character is made up of 2 men under a blanket, and he has a super long neck. He has an absolutely terrifying voice that honestly would be suitable for a serial killer instead of a children's TV show, and the TV station that ran the show had been called Avant-Garde for not being afraid to show a puppet that isn't pretty, but I don't think not pretty is the best way to put it. I think downright terrifying is a far more accurate description of this guy. It's so creepy, but it's so 1980s. In our number 6 spot today, we have Cat Dog. Cat Dog is actually a cartoon I can remember watching when I was a kid, and I do remember it scaring the heck out of me. Maybe I was just easily scared, but I don't think so. Cat Dog is half cat, half dog creature that gets itself into situations and has quite the time figuring everything out, considering the whole cat half and dog half can't seem to get along with each other. This is already a weird premise, but it's not even the strangest part of the show. There is an episode when Cat wants to brush Dog's teeth, and he crawls into his own mouth and travels through its own body to get to the dog side, where it then comes out of Dog's mouth. So now, Cat is hanging out of Dog's mouth, inside out, veins and muscles and everything we never want to see exposed. I know this was probably meant to just be a silly little thing, but it's scary. I don't know, man. It's a lot for me to process. I can't even imagine a child. Maybe I'm looking into it a little too much, but like, I don't know. There's just a weird vibe going on here. I don't like it. No thank you. In our number 5 spot today, we have Frothy Dog. Moving on from Cat Dog to Frothy Dog, alright? Frothy Dog was a part of Cartoon Network's Cartoons That Never Made It. You'll soon find out why. This series of shorts were small little cartoons that would play sometimes before commercials, or they would be put in somewhere to break up a longer running show, and the whole point of them were that they were supposed to be these little snippets or promos for cartoons that didn't ever get fleshed out into full shows, for very obvious reasons. Frothy Dog is the show that never was, and it is about exactly what you were most likely assuming it is about, which is a dog with rabies. The short features a pretty upbeat tune, so it's not necessarily scary, but it's very very disturbing. Some of the lyrics are things like, "You can look, but you shouldn't touch, or else he'll gnaw your arm off." Okay, not exactly a nice ring. Or another part where they explain that Frothy is always smiling because he has lockjaw. Alright, I can't believe this is real. At the end of the day, I feel extremely grateful that this is one that never made it into a full series, because I just don't think anyone really needs a frothy dog in their life, and I stand by that. In our number 4 spot today, we have Happy Tree Friends. Happy Tree Friends is absolutely not a show I would ever show to a child for many reasons, okay? Just get that out there. I think that's important to start off with. This show is an adult cartoon that is disguised like a kid's show. If you just saw the characters, you would have no idea what dark things really happen, because all of the characters are cute little forest animals, and the animation is very bright and very colorful, but the show is actually pretty horrifying. Each episode shows these cute little forest animals getting into extremely violent and graphic situations. Sometimes it is through accidents, and sometimes it is absolutely deliberate, and the violence ranges from smaller injuries and pain to some pretty full-blown gruesome activity. Most of the characters who die in the show do find themselves reincarnated for the next episode though, so I guess that's a plus. I'm just trying to find the bright side here, you know, glass half full. In our number 3 spot today, we have Ghostly Thrillers. Ghostly Thrillers is a creepy little animated movie that features 2 stories. One being The Youth Who Wanted to Shiver, which is about a boy who isn't afraid of anything, so he sets out on an adventure to learn how to shiver in fear. But it's the other part of this film, called Ghost in the Shed, that I really want to talk about today. Ghost in the Shed starts off with a traveling salesman who unfortunately knocks on the wrong door one day. He knocks on a farmer's door just before dusk and asks if he can spend the night. The farmer and his sons are more than happy to have him stay, because they actually just end up killing and robbing him before the sun comes up the next day. After this, they buried his body underneath the shed in the back, and no one ever suspected a thing. Flash forward quite a few years, and the area has become more populated, and a new family lives in the house now. This new family obviously doesn't know about the body buried in the back, and they are actually good people and not killers. The salesman's spirit, of course, has been lingering around, and he won't move on to the other side until he gets someone to find his body so that people can know what happened to him. Basically, the rest of the film is just the salesman haunting this family until they finally dig up the backyard and find his skeleton, and honestly, the whole concept is just not something I would have assumed would be for children. I feel like there are real adult horror movies with the exact same plot, so this might just be one to skip over for the kids. In our number 2 spot today, we have Feline Follies. Feline Follies was created in 1919 and was the first time we got to see the character of Felix the cat. This cartoon shows Felix, who is called Master Tom at this point, meeting a female white cat. Felix serenades her and they fall in lust with each other, and Felix says that he will devote all 9 of his lives to her. How romantic. He even sings so loud he wakes up an entire neighborhood. While this is all going on, a group of mice have broken into Felix's home and basically just trashed it. When Felix's owner comes home and sees the mess, she blames Felix and ends up throwing him out of the house. This is when Felix decides that he will go and live with his new lady cat friend. To Felix's surprise, he now realizes that he is the father to an entire litter of kittens. At this point, you might be asking yourself how this cartoon is dark and how it could have possibly made it this high on the list. Well, it is how this one ends that really gets you. Felix obviously wasn't ready for the consequence of his actions, because once he sees all of his little kitten children, his reaction is to run away. He runs towards the local gas house where he lays down and sticks a hose in his mouth and turns it on. So basically, he just takes his own life by intentionally inhaling coal gas. Definitely not how I thought this one was gonna turn out, and what a questionable storyline for a children's cartoon overall. What were people thinking, man? In our number 1 spot today, we have The Devil's Ball, or The Mascot. This stop-motion animated short comes from 1933 and is honestly quite a ride, and a mix between fascinating and terrifying. Basically, it starts off fairly normal and fine, with a stuffed dog named Duffy coming to life and then heading out on an adventure for an orange, but this isn't what we are here to talk about today. Once midnight strikes, the devil comes out of a liquor bottle, and this is when things really start to get crazy. So basically now the devil is holding some kind of soiree, and things such as different creatures, vegetables, old garbage, it all begins to come to life and displaying human characteristics, and these are the guests of the ball. Over the course of the ball, we see some pretty spooky things, like when the devil tries to convince one of the guests to stab someone. Duffy is kind of the saving grace grace of this whole thing because Duffy is actually cute and basically the only creature in this whole thing that isn't absolutely terrifying. All in all, the whole thing was originally 40 minutes, but it is tough to find that version, and most you will find now are a 25-minute cut. It certainly is worth a watch, but I wouldn't necessarily show this one to any children unless you want them to be scarred for life.
Starting off this countdown, we have DuckTales Illuminati. In Season 3, Episode 13, in an episode of DuckTales titled Yuppie Ducks, fans notice something quite strange in the background of a scene. So in this episode, Scrooge gets a bad itch and has to go to a doctor. The doctor has some weird decorations in his office, though. In the background, there's an eye chart, but the eye chart clearly reads, "Ask about Illuminati." It's not that subtle at all. And why is it that the animators decided to throw in that little subliminal message? Are they trying to tell us something? In our 9th spot, we have SpongeBob's TV. And if you guys are liking this video so far and you want to see more content like this, then make sure to give it a big thumbs up. Not gonna lie, SpongeBob is filled with dirty jokes. As kids watching the show, it often went over our heads. But if you go back and re-watch the episodes, chances are you'll understand what the writers were truly trying to convey. Take the scene of SpongeBob featured in the episode Your Shoes Untied. In this episode, SpongeBob forgets how to tie his shoes, but that's irrelevant. In one scene, SpongeBob turns on the TV and relaxes back in his chair. On the TV, we see Sea Anemone dancing back and forth. SpongeBob is clearly into this. Then Gary enters the room and he quickly switches the channel to a football game. And he's clearly embarrassed, implying that what he was originally watching was inappropriate. Gary caught him right in the middle of him watching a rated R program. In our 8th spot, we have the 3 Little Pigs. Disney is sick for including this in the show. So let's take a look at the 3 Little Pigs. In one scene, we see the pigs singing and dancing in one of their homes. But beside them in the back is a framed picture of sausages. And we all know that sausages are made out of pig. To make matters worse, the frame is labeled as father. So their father got turned into sausages and eaten. In another scene, we see another framed piece of meat artwork. This time, it's a ham leg, and it's also labeled father. So the 3 Little Pigs' father was killed, hacked up, and sold as different meat items. Disgusting. Moving on to number 7, we have Adventure Time. Adventure Time is just another one of those shows that is filled with inappropriate jokes. But there are 2 main episodes that I want to talk about today. The first one being the episode titled, What Have You Done? In this episode, the Ice King accidentally infects all of the Candy Kingdom with an ice plague. And so Princess Bubblegum looks back through her research book to see if she's got a cure for this. Well, as she is flipping through the book, we see a number written on the page, 531-8008. Look at this number in the mirror and it spells out boobs. It does. They also carefully place the dots in the numbers to represent, you know, come on, you get it. I don't have to say it. The next episode I'm going to be talking about is the one called Blank-Eyed Girl. Now this isn't as subtle as the last episode, but basically in this episode, Jake and Flynn are looking for the creepy stuff book. While exploring a shelf with many books, they come across one titled Butt Stuff. Again, I really don't need to explain this. Moving on to number 6, we have the Rugrats. Grandpa Lou from the Rugrats always creeped me out. And the next scene from the Rugrats proves that he's just as creepy as I always thought he was. So in one episode, we see Grandpa Lou babysitting Tommy and Chucky. He tells them that he rented a movie for them. He says, and I quote, "Let's get down to some real fun. I've rented you boys some movies." He then holds up a movie featuring the Reptar. And then he holds up the movie that he rented for himself. He then says, but my personal favorite is Lonely Space Vixens. The movie that he's holding features a green-skinned female alien in a bikini. He then laughs and wiggles his eyebrows and says, now that's for after you go to bed. Ew! Ugh, I'm sorry, like that definitely wasn't necessary. Ugh, get that image out of my mind. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Dexter's Lab. For this show, let's take a look at the episode titled Nuclear Confusion. In this episode, Dee Dee steals an important part to one of Dexter's inventions, and then decides to make him go on a scavenger hunt before he can get the piece back. One of the clues told Dexter to look next door. So he goes there, and we see him in the kitchen with the neighbor lady. There, she offers him cookies, but drops one to the floor. She then goes to retrieve it, and written across her bottom is Dad's trophy. Just take that in for a moment, okay? Obviously, the next clue was for Dexter to go look at his dad's trophy. But we all know that that has a double meaning. Also, how the heck did Dee Dee manage to write that across her bum without her even feeling it? I'm concerned. In our fourth spot, we have the Krusty Krab. This next fact, or whatever you want to call it, has ruined SpongeBob for me. I can never look at the show again the same. So SpongeBob, as we all know, lives in an underwater town called Bikini Bottom. He works at the Krusty Krab. The Krusty Krab in Bikini Bottom. Just think about it, okay? Not only that, but there's also the Chum Bucket. Bikini Bottom has a Krusty Krab and a Chum Bucket. If I have to explain this, then you're too young to be watching this video. The creators really thought they were sly with that one. Coming in at number 3, we have Dexter's assistant. How did we not catch on to this as kids? We were just so young and naive. Okay, in an episode, Dexter gets fed up with Dee Dee and decides to hire a replacement. He then hires a woman named Candy, a very tall and attractive blonde woman who is blessed in the chest area, if you get what I'm saying. At one point, Dexter asked her to dance around. She replies with, okay, but it's $50 extra. Also, the fact that they named her Candy? Come on. They made that too obvious. In our second spot, we have the Genius. Here's another dirty reference from SpongeBob. Are we surprised? I'm not. So in the episode titled Texas, Sandy gets homesick and wants to go home. If you guys know, then you know. You're lucky we're keeping that in for you. Patrick and SpongeBob are trying to think of ways to make her feel less homesick. During this conversation, Patrick has a good idea, and SpongeBob says, Patrick, your genius is showing. Patrick then panics and quickly covers his crotch area. What rhymes with genius? Yeah, you know exactly what he thought SpongeBob was referring to. And in our number 1 spot, we have Rocco's Modern Life. This next hidden message was a little too much, and in the end, it ended up being cut out from the episode. So let's take a look at the episode titled Hut Saw Raw. In the episode, we see Rocco picking berries from a bush. Upon picking one of the berries, we see a bear run out of the bush, whimpering while holding his crotch, implying that Rocco picked the wrong set of berries, if you know what I mean. Now, this scene did see air, but then it was edited out by Nickelodeon for future broadcasts, and for the Season 2 DVD release. But in Canada, they didn't bother to edit out, and they just let it play with this interesting scene still in it.